Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the Hakugei Nightfire Elf. That's a big name. This is Hakugei's latest flagship IEM, you could call it this way. And it's an IEM where they have gone all out in terms of the technology used and what they've tried to achieve with it. It's very much I would say, the polar opposite of the Anunnaki, which I recently reviewed. And I say the polar opposite of the Anunnaki, and what do I mean by that? Well, the Anunnaki was or is a warmer sounding IEM which focuses on the mids, but it's overall a warmer sounding IEM, while the Elf, I'm just going to call it Elf for the sake of being easier, while the Elf is an IEM which its focus has been technicalities, detail, but never putting aside the musicality part of things. Anyway, this is the box, Hakugei fashion, simple. Inside there, all it brings is a case, which is this case here. Okay, nice case, big, but it's nice. And inside this case then comes the actual IEM, which I'll show to you in a second, the tips, okay, tips, the different terminations for the cable. The cable is you can buy it separately. It's called the Hakugei. One second. It's called the Hakugei Gentleman, and it can be bought currently for around $65–70. Okay, so you're getting a decent cable. Hakugei or a cable manufacturer, so that's not going to be an issue. Anyway, here's the IEM itself. Okay, cable looks the part, looks the business, nice, and the IEMs themselves as well. Very nice looking IEM, resin shell, 3D printed. It really looks the part, it looks the business. Nicely designed faceplate as well, with a nice finish. It looks very smart. It looks like a good quality product. It looks like a premium product. It doesn't have any signs of cheapness or anything. Very nice build. You can see that they paid attention to the design, to the construction of this IEM. It wasn't just a slapping together of parts. Okay, in terms of the fit, it fits perfectly. I have absolutely no issues with the fit. I'm using the KiwiEars 7 tips because with this IEM it just works perfectly. That's it. I like the way this IEM functions with this tip. The other tip that also works very nicely with the Elf is the Clarion, the TRI Clarion, or the TRN T tips. They work as well quite nicely, but I still prefer the KiwiEars 7s. All right. Anyway, that's basically the Elf in terms of its appearance, what it brings in accessories, which is well accessorized. Its selling price is around the $270 mark, so not exactly cheap, but if you consider just the cable alone is a $60 to $70 item, you already start seeing that, well, they might be charging $270 give or take, but they are giving accessories which themselves are expensive. Okay. What then can I tell you about the Elf, and what have they tried to achieve, and what is the design philosophy of the Elf? Well, it is I could consider it a tribrid, in the sense that we have DDs, BAs, and Piezzos. The way that they are set up is quite interesting, and it's very similar actually to a setup used by another IEM, which is the Geekwold GK100, which I also have here. Okay, and it's one of the IEMs that I will be comparing it with. What they've basically done is they've got two sets of 8mm Piezzos. One set of these Piezzos is then attached to an 8mm dynamic driver. One of these dynamic drivers is a DLC diaphragm, and it handles the high frequencies, and is then coupled to an 8mm piezo, which sorry, the high frequencies, no, that first DLC DD handles the medium the mids frequency, the lower mid frequencies, let's put it that way. and then it has the accompanying piezo, which does the high frequencies. The other 8mm piezo is attached to a dual diaphragm 8mm driver. One of the diaphragms is LCP, and it handles the bass, and the other one is a titanium, and it handles the sub bass, let's put it that way. And that particular piezo unit handles the ultra high frequencies. And then the two BAs are handling mids and high frequency as well. So it's a complex system, very similar, like I said, to what the GQ100 has done, with what Geekwold did with the GQ100. But it's working, and it's working really well. And when compared to the GQ100, and I'll get to that in a second, in stock format, using these same tips, these same setup in terms of DAP, amp, whatever, this one I think will please, the Elf will satisfy more people. Why? I'll explain. Because the balance that they've reached between the lower frequencies and the mids and the highs is better achieved. It's not as energetic as the Geekwold is, especially in the mids, upper mids and treble, which for those that are treble heads, they will appreciate it. But for those that are a little bit sensitive to certain frequencies above 1K, the balance that they've achieved in the Elf has been more wisely done. And although they follow basically the same curve, and when I show you the graphs just now, you'll see exactly what I mean, I think this one will then be the more satisfying of the two. Of course, it's more elaborate than what I'm just saying now, but that to kind of like set the initial stage on what the Elf is about. I've also got here the KiwiEars Quintet, and I thought it'd be interesting to have a planar as well, and I decided to have here the MP145 from HIDIZS. Okay, so let's talk the sound here. The sound of the Elf is very much a sound which kind of has a QDC style tuning, which means a relatively early pinna gain, with very detailed, very detailed mids, upper mids and treble. That's the one part that immediately jumps to you when you start listening to the Elf, very much like on the GQ100. The detail capability, the technicalities that this IM is capable of are really something else. They are really something else. There's no lack of micro detailing, there's no lack of macro detailing, there's no lack of all the twinklies and sparklies you can possibly desire. Where then the differences mainly lie with regards to this to the GQ100 is that the GQ100, since it has a little bit more energy in that mid, upper mid and treble area, and I'm talking about a difference that can sometimes reach 3 dBs in certain areas, that balance between then the vocals and all of that, and then the bass, which will complement that in terms of harmonics, makes the GQ100 be a more brighter sounding IM. Both of them have that QDC V signature, let's put it that way. Okay, so they both got very nice thick bass, it's got decent speed, it's got decent resolution. The bass, it's not an issue. Yeah, I mean the 8mm drivers that they're using for the bass, the dual diaphragm ones, are more than capable of giving us very nice high quality bass, and in ample quantity. It's just then the balance that has been struck in terms of the mids, the upper mids and treble, that differentiates the two. And in stock format, this one, the Elf has done it slightly better. I've always been a fan of the GQ100. I've always liked the GQ100, so I can't really say I choose one over the other. I like them both. I really like them both, especially because on the GQ100 I have performed a little mod, which when I reviewed it I actually mentioned that it's a mod that you could do as well. And personally, this is how I mainly listen to it, because it helped me control a peak which the GQ100 has around the 5 kHz area, that in stock format it's very much noticeable on the GQ100. On the Elf, not so. And that's why the Elf does beat it there. But the moment I do this little small mod, which I'll show to you now in a second, that peak is also reduced, and then they become very, very identical, okay? And the mod is a very simple mod. You just basically take, and I'm also using the KiwiEars 7 tips. You basically take the tip, okay? And if you see, I've inserted a medium density foam on it, inside of it. See? It's got a medium density foam inserted inside of it. The foam is this style of foam, okay? So let me just get it out here. Okay, you take one of these foams, medium density, and you just shove it in there, and that's it. And that does then the job of lowering just ever so slightly the energy level across the mids, upper mids, and treble, taking away to a certain extent the slight peakiness that occurs, and just making the GK100 sound absolutely flawless, in my opinion. I really, really have enjoyed the GK100 because I can understand the difficulty of trying to bring together all of those drivers. I mean, the quintet was praised for, oh wow, they took a DD and they took a BA and a planar and a Piezzo, and they married them so coherently, and they did this and that, and everybody was going on praising KiwiEars for doing this, which they deserve that praise, mind you. But it seems that people forgot that Geekwold had already done that. Fair enough, it's only got one driver or one driver type missing here, which is the planar. But over here you have one DD, two BAs, one planar, one Piezzo. Over here you got three DDs effectively, okay, two BAs and two double Piezzos. So the complexity of this driver setup is as much, if not even more so, than the KiwiEars and the quintet. So, and it also deserves merit because what they've done here is faultless. And the Elf has got the exact same sort of setup. And again, the fact that they've been able to marry these three driver types, and especially the Piezzos, which can be problematic, and make it sound the way that it does sound, I think it deserves all the praise that it will be getting from me, at least. So in terms of bass, we've spoken. In terms of mids, we've spoken. Vocals are, in my opinion, perfect. Male and female vocals, very much what they should be. There's no real lack of clarity or lack of realism to those vocals. Instruments as well, for the most part, are pretty decent. On occasions, some wind instruments, some jazz can sound just a little bit over energetic, but not aggressive or not out of tone or anything, just a little bit over energetic. The piano as well, the key strikes can sound sometimes just a little bit over energetic, but again, I wouldn't consider it to be out of tonality or out of timbre or anything of the sort. It's just over energetic. And that basically what I'm saying with that is that the timbre and the tonality is, in my opinion, quite well achieved. It doesn't offend me, nothing. I think it's faultless. In terms of the treble or the higher frequencies, that's where, well, as you already noticed it in the GK100, and you also noticed it here slightly in the Elf. You do notice that sometimes there is a little bit of metallicness, a little bit of that sound, which can make things sound unnecessarily cold. Let's put it that way. And to that extent, I mean, the mod that I do here on the GK100 of the foam does help with that. But ultimately, the thing that I think is the most important when those of you that decide to go for the GK100 or for the Elf, is to have a nicer, warmer sounding source. And I mean, the Cayenne in that aspect is faultless. As well, the 43198, the Cyrus Logic chipped decks or amps also sound faultless. As do the AKM 4493 and 4499. Also they sound. So I would say that a warmer sounding source will definitely help control and maybe even do away completely with that metallicness that you find in the upper mids and treble area. The upper mids and treble, but besides that issue, okay, besides that, they're faultless. It's a clean, it's detailed, it's you know, maybe not 100% audiophile correct. I will agree to that, but you know, this, I think, be it the Elf or the GK100, they were tuned to be detailed, and that detail or capability, that the you know, being so technically capable doesn't or it's not doesn't, but can sometimes mean that the audiophile correctness is somewhat put in second in a second plane, in second place. Technically, huge soundstage. I mean, width, it's, you know, really wide, height, depth, very big. Imaging, spot on. Detailed retrieval, like I've said already, is again, and resolution, perfect. So, be it either one of these two, in terms of its technical capabilities, they are faultless. Of the two in stock format, again, I would say that the one that is the more balanced, the more is the Elf, because of that lower energy level of the mids, upper mids and treble. But when I show you the graph, you'll see exactly what I mean. With the mod, like I've mentioned, the GK100 becomes the same thing as the Elf. Actually, with the T-tip and the mod done, the GK100 becomes a very, very special IM. The T-tip especially, or the Clarion, but mainly the T-tip. The T-tip on the GK100 with the mod of the foam is something that will impress even the most skeptical. Let me put it that way. And I'm sure, I actually didn't try that mod on the Elf, to be totally honest. I haven't, but I am sure to a certain extent that that same mod will work in a very favorable way on the Elf. Very favorable way on the Elf. As compared then to, I've talked about this comparison. So as compared then to the Quintet and to the MP145, what can I say? The Quintet is known for being very capable technically, and I've said it myself as well. But when you compare the two of them, I'm not saying that it's the Quintet is not still capable of being a highly detailed IEM. No, it still is a very much capable IEM of very good detail and very, 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 very technically capable. Okay, but it slightly pales compared to the Elf. The Elf takes that to another few steps above in terms of its technical capabilities. You know, the twinklies and the sparklies here are faultless, and the one thing that will impress those that have the opportunity to listen both of them is that slight complaint, and which I also had, of the Quintet in specific areas of the frequency 5, 6, 7K being a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too energetic, which would lead to some fatigue. I never felt that on the Elf. Okay, so I would say that this is, for the sake of not generating too much controversy, I would say that this is every bit as capable technically as the Quintet. Detailed retrieval, imaging, soundstage. I'm not even gonna say that it's better in certain ones of them, although I do think the soundstage is better. I do think the imaging is better. But for the sake of maintaining peace, I'm gonna say that it's every bit as capable, okay, with the added advantage of not being as fatiguing, okay. In terms of the bass performance, there is a very, very slight advantage of the Quintet in terms of the sub bass performance. But you know, it's really kind of not noticeable, because the mid bass on the Elf or on the GK100 has always been a part that I think they've achieved very faultlessly. So the mid bass really you know, gives character to the whole frequency spectrum above 1K, which here it is obtained as well, because it is a very musical IM, the Quintet nonetheless. So if that's the good, you know, that's the one of the things that surprises a lot the Quintet, is that you kind of, you know, you either have a very technical IM or then you have a very musical IM. To have both of them at specific price point is never an easy achievement, and they've done that with the Quintet. The Elf has done that as well. You have an extremely musical IM, in my opinion, which is also very technically capable. Okay, so you know what is it beating the Quintet? Well, I'll leave that to you to decide. For me personally, if money was not a problem, because of the reality this is $70 more than that, I would choose the Elf. But that's me personally, okay? But you know, have a listen and then decide. That's I think is the best thing, or the best suggestion that I can give. As compared to the MP145, again, this is not so much a comparison of which is best, which is worse. That's a single planar driver, you know, so it's handling all the frequency, you know, from a single driver. The thing that I think the MP145 ultimately does very well is obtain a balance in the sound, which is very okay. There is, as I mentioned, there is always or there has been this tendency of wanting to make planars have that kind of DD feel to it, and by doing that trying to control that metallicness or that typical planar timbre that you find, which they've achieved very well in the MP145. And so what that does when you compare the two of them is that musically, the one that sounds the most organic, let's put it that way, probably the MP145 will take that. Not by much, but it will take it. It's quite interesting how well they've struck that balance. I mean, you listen to, for example, Analog from Soul Persona. Both of them do it very well, but it just sounds, if you are a fan of old school or analog, it just sounds slightly more analog there. So in that aspect, okay, you can say that edges it out. Technically, I think they both are very capable, but technically, ultimately, the Elf does edge out slightly the MP145. So at the end of the day, it's like I'm saying, it's not really one is better than the other. You know, they've got different tuning styles, different tuning premises. So you could probably consider them to be good complements to each other, okay, and not so much the one is best or one is worse or anything of the sort. Anyway, guys, that's basically it. As I mentioned, this is $270. The Geekwold is $200. This is $220 roughly. It's going to be $199, $200. So they're more or less kind of priced at the same value. You know, you could say, but $270, it's more expensive. Is it worth it? Well, as I always say, look, everyone knows the amount of money they want to spend. You know, if you are afraid of modding and you don't want to mod and you don't want to change things and you don't want to start putting foams and stuff, now between the two of them, then I would say just get the Elf, pay that little extra and get the Elf. All right. If you don't mind, you know, doing this little mod like I've done, then the Geekwold is the one that makes the most sense, because you save $70, you spend a few dollars in buying the foam tips, and that's it, the foam inserts, and that's it. I mean, it also brings a nice cable as well from Hakugei, by the way. So, you know, really no issue. Compared with the Quintet, personally, myself, I would choose it. That's it, you know. I think it is overall a more complete IM than the Quintet, and compared to the MP145, I think they are side grades, honestly. But I thought it would be just interesting to have it here, so that's why it's over here. Anyway, I'll show you now the graphs and we'll wrap it up. All right, you take care now. Bye bye. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section for the Hakugei Elf. This is the graph of the Elf, as you can see. Very non-offensive, nice bass, nicely done, basically no bleeding to the mids, relatively steep pinna gain, which peaks just below 2K, then plateaus that dip around that area there, which can sometimes be problematic, a little couple-related peak, and then some extension past 10K. So, yeah, I mean, overall, it's a nice graph. I mean, just for the sake of comparison, this is the QDC Noli VX, just so that you guys can see why I stated that I kind of, agreed with the fact that it has like a QDC styled tuning. As you can see, that's the QDC graph. So QDC style tuning, obviously not as prominent in the pinna gain, so not as V-shaped in the pinna gain. Anyway, that's the Elf. What I'm going to show you now is, I'm actually going to take away the Elf for a second. I'm going to show you now away the GQ100. And so this is the standard stock GQ100. This is the one that I show you now, is the graph with, don't pay attention to this yet, this was just some noise. This is with the KiwiEars 07 with the foam inserted, so I've been able to kind of do away with that little 5K peak there that can be a little bit, for me at least, bothersome. And then this third one is with the TRN T-tip and with the same foam inserted inside. With this particular tip, I lose a little bit of energy up top there, but honestly it's not as noticeable as you would think. And in this particular setup, I think the GQ100 is really a very, very special IM. I mean, this gets really very close to, I mean, just going back to what I was showing you just now, the Noli VX. That's the Noli VX. Once again, let me just quickly line them up so you guys can see. That's, I'm not saying that it's a Noli VX, and I said that already when I did review it, but that gets darn close to the style of sound of an Noli VX, and it sounds very much kind of like that. Okay, anyway, this was to show you then the progression that can be done with the GQ100 if you use those foams. Okay, now I'm going to compare just the stock one with the Elf, and as you can see, they look very similar, so I'm sure they must be sharing some sort of common denominators here. Base is basically the same. I mean, this is, I'm not even going to consider this different. The way the pinna gain is done, is speaking and everything. The difference lies mainly is in how this then, in the Elf plateaus, the dip at around 5K is more significant, and then the extension basically is the same. And just that, this difference here is enough to make the Elf a more pleasurable listen. If I compare the Elf with the GQ100 and the little mod I've done, let me just actually change the color here, make it something which can stand out a little bit more. There we go. Okay, as you can see, they become basically identical. So, you know, if you think that if you have a GQ100 and if you think that you want to have a listen to what the Hakugei Elf sounds like, then just do this. Take a KiwiEars 07 tip, just put in some medium density foam on inside the tip, and that's it. There you go. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to put back on the stock one so you guys can see. There we go. Now, compared to the other two IMs which I selected, the first is going to be the where is it? There we go. The Quartet. So this is the KiwiEars Quartet. As I mentioned, the Quartet's got a little bit more sub bass. Okay, and you can pick up on it. All right, but the Elf makes up with a little bit more mid bass and a little bit more a slightly thicker sound here. Okay, which then also kind of helps counteract the steeper pinna gain that you have. And then the rest is very, very similar. The difference here that you do notice between the two of them, like I said, is that it's just less. I found personally, this is me personally, please, I found the Elf less fatiguing to listen to, and it's got even more detail and more twinklies and sparklers than the KiwiEars, without that meaning that it's going to be excessively prominent in terms of the BA timbre or the metallicness of the Piezzo or anything else. So as long as you choose a warmer source, you should be more than fine. And compared to the HIDIZS MP145, the bass is very similar. The HIDIZS maybe perhaps just a little bit more bass, and then you can see here the overall design, let's put it that way, is basically the same. Very similar, just that obviously at a lower level. And what then it translates to is the Elf more detailed, more twinklies, more sparklies. The MP145 has got a more organic kind of sound. Okay, you can still feel that it's a planar. It's still got that planar air, that planar space. Okay, but it's a little bit more organic, so it's more of a side grade. I think these two would complement each other very nicely. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review. This is the Hakugei Elf, a very solid IM that definitely I can recommend. But as always, I would always tell you guys to go have a listen. Oh, just for the sake of curiosity, here is the Anunnaki, so that you guys can just quickly get a glimpse of what was done differently. Where is it? There we go. My apologies. My apologies, guys. I'm kind of lost a little bit here. There we go. All right. So that's the Anunnaki. And now let me just line it up. There we go. Okay. The difference here, obviously, you can notice straight away, is the more bass of the Anunnaki. Yes, and the bass of the Anunnaki is more prominent, not necessarily more quality. And then the way that the upper mids and the trailing end of the mids, upper mids, is even more energetic than the Elf, although you do not perceive it that way. But then it doesn't have the same sort of treble, the same sort of extension. So even though you might look at this graph and think, oh, it's going to be more, more intense in the mids, no, it's not. It's about the same thing, with the issue added as well that it hasn't got as much upper mids and treble. So it sounds darker, it sounds warmer. So it's kind of two opposite tuning. The Anunnaki will be more for those which are not treble heads and want a nice thick bass, and that has been done flawlessly. The issue with Anunnaki is that the price is perhaps just a little bit disadjusted to the competition. Excuse me. And then the Elf is a more detailed oriented IM, so, loads of detail, loads of ability to be technically very proficient. Once again, yes, I would say that the price can be a little bit of an issue, but somehow it's more justified. Somehow it's more, it makes more sense because the accessories that it brings are pretty decent. Okay, guys, that's it. As always, like and subscribe. Questions, please ask, and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as possible. All right, you take care. Bye bye.